Hello and welcome to another video by Flash Jazz Cat. So what have I got here on the desk? Well, of course it's an Atari 800 and this one happens to have an incognito board in it. And what I'm going to do today, hopefully all being well, is installing a VBXE board in this machine. Right, so how are you going to accomplish this incredible feat, John? I hear you ask, and I'm glad you asked that question, because I'm going to do it using this Video Board XE Atari 800 adapter, which was designed, as you can see, by Candelo Sin, with artwork by Deli and TQA. And this adapter board happens to be available at the community section of PCBWay.com, and that segues very nicely into the message from this video's sponsor. PCBWay are experts in PCB prototyping. So if you need a prototype PCB, they're the place to go to. They have 8 years of experience in this stuff, and not only do they offer PCB manufacturing facilities, but they offer 3D printing, CNC machining, a whole host of different services. And they often run special offers and even competitions. If you head on down to PCBWay.com, you're going to support them, and in so doing, you'll also support me. And thank you very much. Alright, so what we're going to need here, apart from the adapter board, of course, is a VBXE. Now, VBXEs, certainly the XE variety anyway, were delivered initially with, I think, female headers on the back like this. And I think it changed to male later on. So the reason that this is unpopulated, this one, of course, Candle himself sent me, is that it's not known whether or not you're going to have a female or a male header on the VBXE itself, so you need to populate this board accordingly. So I'm going to put all female headers on the bottom here and all male headers on the board here. So as you know, if you've ever installed a VBXE before, we have, I think on G6, we have the oscillator output, or the crystal output, which actually forms the master clock for the machine, and that's going to be no different here. And over here we've got external select, CAS inhibit, non-maskable interrupt, I think. Over here we've got the D6, D7 decoding, and normally you would run these, you'd have headers on here and run the wires to different places on the motherboard. Well, that's all taken care of here. So when we plug this board in here, most of those signals are going to actually come through the expansion card bus straight into the board, and those that don't, well, among those that don't are actually some signals that we need to take directly from ANTIC. So we're going to have to run this cable here from this header right the way across to the back of the ANTIC chip on the CPU board. We also need, for additional signals, this 50-way ribbon cable, which is a PBI connection essentially to the incognito itself. So you're not going to be able to do this modification easily, if at all, without an incognito. In fact, the incognito, this VBXE in an 800 is only going to work if the incognito has the more recent code on the CPLD. I'm hoping it's going to work this, because I did actually try this once before, a year or two or maybe more ago, when Candle and I were discussing this idea, and I actually hacked a VBXE. Obviously I had to take the 800 apart completely, it wouldn't fit together, but I put the VBXE right on top of the CPU board with a piece of ribbon cable, and I hacked all the other connections. I got the machine to boot up, but the one thing I couldn't, I got RGB output from VBXE, so we're pretty sure that's going to work. But the one thing I could not get to work was the FX core on the VBXE. So the no VBXE software, VBXE demos or drivers or anything like that, none of them could pick up the fact there was a VBXE on the machine. So you just got RGB output, which was very nice, but no extra functionality whatsoever, and I couldn't figure out why that was. So I'm 50-50 about whether this is going to work at all. At the time, Candle blamed, or he said that there was a variable, at least the only variable was the fact that my 800 has the Supercolor CPU card in it, which is rather difficult to remove without killing the video output. So I'm kind of just crossing my fingers and hoping that with the proper adapter board it's going to work, because maybe I did something wrong the last time. Who knows? So we'll find out anyway. So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put these headers on the VBXE board. It might be a good idea actually to put the pin headers on the board first and then plug everything in before I solder the headers onto the VBXE itself, just so that we don't have any alignment problems later on. So we'll do it that way, I think, and that'll ensure that everything's nice and straight. So I had to go scavenging around basically for various pin headers and such like. Alright, so we get this on nice and straight, so the tiniest little bit of... Alright, so that's sitting flat, so that we can go ahead with that one. Solder that one properly. That looks nice and straight. Let's do the next one. And then, as I say, what I'll do is I'll plug the VBXE into the top of this with the female headers not plugged in, not soldered in rather, and then we'll solder them in with it all put together, and that will ensure that everything's going to line up properly. Now I don't have any double row strips here, so I'm just going to have to use these single row ones and double it up, unfortunately. You really do need 3 pairs of hands for this. I'll just tack a random pin down and get the thing flat. There we go. Right, so everything's sort of loosely together now. So I'll now put these, I'll put these headers actually in here, like this, and like this, and like this. Right, and then we'll put the board on top of here. That's sort of bent a little ways. That's gone in there. That's gone in there. Right, so it's in. Let's push it home fully so we can see it's in now. And now I'm going to solder the tops of these connectors so that everything is nice and straight. A bit of flux on the top of here. I must have picked it up on my hand. It gets all over the place, that stuff. Right, let's go in. I'm going to use the magnifier because I can't see what the hell I'm doing. Right, so now I should be able to pull this apart. That's it. And the headers are all on nice and straight. So we can now push this back on here, no problem at all. So there we go. So that's the completed sandwiched unit. Right, so with that done, we need to look at the other ends of these connections basically. And I'm going to have to dig out a DIN 13 connector as well for the RGB output. So as far as I can establish, this header down here, where we've got VGA sys clock and RGB sys clock, this is going to be our crystal output. And the middle pin is ground, so we're going to have 2 wires going to the transistor, which will remove next to the master crystal on the 800. We've got C-Sync, which of course we need for the monitor output. We've got our 4 signals here, which is going to be ground, RGB select, green, red and blue, whichever order they're in, I can't remember offhand. These signals are all taken care of. So there's our 2 wires to the crystal transistor. one wire for C-Sync going that way. The connections to ANTIC going off from here, and the connections, we'll have a look here. So the connections are halt, ready, ENO through 2, ground, and clock, phi 0 clock. So they'll go straight over to ANTIC. I think Candle missed out the ground connection on there. And that should be that. Plus, of course, our interconnect cable, which is going to go from the PBI connector on the Incognito over to the top connector on this board. And this is going to go in the rear slot on the 800. So I suppose what we need to do now is grab the 800, dismantle the poor thing yet again, and go ahead and install this. Right, so now I'm making these connections on the back of the ANTIC chip, starting with, what did I start with? Halt, which is pin 9, and then I want ready, which is pin 15. So if we count back from the end here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, so that's going to be that one there. Of course, the Supercolor CPU card does have customized headers for this, for halt and ready for the Incognito, but I'm not going to use them. I'm just going to put them all on the back of the chip just for the sake of consistency. Right now I want ENO, which is pin 2, right. Then I want EN1, which is pin 3. Pin 34 for phase 0 clock. So that's all of those connections on there, like so. And hopefully I've got the length of this cable just right, so that when I put it all back together, it's all going to slot through the little gap quite nicely, hopefully. So that's got to go like this way on. Hope so. Right, so I know for a fact these go on like that. And that should go in here like so. Right, like that. So that's going to fit reasonably well if I twist it around a bit. Right, so that should just lie flat. Hopefully this will just go underneath the top cage. Hopefully, if I tuck the thing, yeah, it's going to have to be tucked right down the back here and twist round, and hopefully it'll just push it right down there like that and then plug it in. There. So when the cage goes on the top here, it should all snap together quite nicely. Yeah, I might have to take a notch out of that metal or the plastic, one of the two, I think, but that's looking reasonably good. So before we get to this point anyway, we'll test it all out. Yes, it's certainly quite the job, this. So we'll put our other headers on the board. We might as well do it now. Right, so we've plugged in the RGB connection there. We're going to leave that cable out of the way for the moment. In fact, we can put that in when we actually fit the thing together. It's these ones at the bottom that I want to make sure are correct. Ground's the longer one. Right. Okay, so with those connections done, we can actually fit this board in here. I think that's it. So that should now go in here like so. Oh, we've got to put the interconnect cable in as well. We might as well do that while we're here. So we'll put our interconnect cable in here. Ooh. Other end in here. Press this down. There we go. Now these wires here could actually go through underneath quite happily, I think. Well, not yet. I won't do that yet because things are going to get complicated enough without trying to route wires just at the moment. So push this board back in. So there we go. So that gives you an idea what it's going to look like when it's all done. It looks pretty good actually, I think. But does it work? That's the question. Does it work? So anyway, now I need to get at the transistor next to the crystal here. I'll show you what I'm going to do. Right, so this transistor here is going to get removed. I've done this part before. I'm going to be careful with the pads on here, and we're going to connect the ground wire, and we're going to connect the crystal output from VBXE down here, and that will be fed into the system. It's looking quite busy, this 800 now, isn't it, with all the stuff it's got in it, the super colour CPU card, etc, etc. And of course we've still got a pass-through PBI connection on the VBXE board, so if anything else comes along that we want to put in this machine, we can do that too. So, okay, so let me just solder on these wires. We'll take this transistor off. I think I can do it without taking the back plate off, hopefully. Once this connection is done, we should be able to power the machine up and at least get a booting machine with the video output from the supercolor CPU card, hopefully. And if we don't, then we've done something wrong. Clean that up a little bit. So the longer wire is ground, and we're going to feed this one here. Just put a little dab solder on there. So it's the rear via there. I'm going to put that right in there like so. Right, that's in, and we should have a ground point somewhere nearby. Yeah, that's ground. Right, so let's just put it back together to the extent that it needs to be reassembled, just to power it on and see if we get anything at all. Right, here we go. So let's get the video cable. Right. We have the right input. No. We've got a red screen. Excellent, excellent. What have I done wrong?
Well, that's great. That's just fucking great, man. Now what the fuck are we supposed to do?
Alright, so there was a slight gap in recording here, a little bit of a break in the narrative continuity. I did manage to get this machine to boot up, and I did actually get RGB output on the DIN 13 connector. So it can work to that extent, but I did have that working previously, some years ago, when I sort of jerry-rigged this whole contraption up, but straight on the CPU board. So it behaves exactly the same as that, in as much as I still can't get any VBXE software to detect the FX core. So for example, the Lema's old school demo for VBXE won't work because it says there's no VBXE connected on the system. I can't even remember what it was in the previous scene when I couldn't get a picture on the machine. I did rectify it, whatever it was. I think it was a connection that I'd messed up somewhere, and I did get the machine to boot. But things have taken a turn even for the worse since the last time I had time to work on this, because now I can't even get this thing to boot up at all. If I select make sure I've got the right input, yes I have. And I don't know why. I'm not even getting am I getting this sync? No, I'm getting no signal. So I'm not even getting composite sync off the thing now. And this is on the legacy monitor output. I think initially some of these connectors, some of these edge connectors on the board might be getting a bit worn out because this machine's been taken apart and put back together again that many times. And this puts me in a bit of a pickle actually, because I need this machine to test a firmware update that I'm preparing for Incognito, and I've been using a customer machine for that, which actually has a Sophia in it. Oh god. So I just can't, I have had a look at this over the past few days. I can't get the thing to boot. I don't know why. I think something has fundamentally gone wrong here. Whether or not removing the XE, the VBXE, will actually allow the thing to work again, I don't know. Hopefully it will, but that doesn't really get me any further in trying to figure out why we're still not getting an FX core. And as I say, I'm quite disappointed that I didn't manage to film the part where the thing was at least showing a picture over the RGB, but it ain't now because it doesn't boot. Oh god. So I've got a couple of spare boards actually. What I'm inclined to try and do, which I didn't really want to do now because I'm shut until January, because I've got other things to do, but I need a working 800 with an Incognito in it, so I might prep another board up for an Incognito, stick an Incognito in it, maybe test this in the other board, because Candle seems to think that the Supercolor CPU card might be upsetting some timings or something. I don't know. He also recommended changing a couple of these two chips here, and I just haven't had time to tear another 800 apart and steal a couple of ICs from it. So unfortunately I'm going to have to come back to this at some point, but the initial observation anyway, and you're going to have to take this on trust from me, is that when I was able to get this machine to work, there's two things that I noticed. Firstly, I couldn't get the VBXE FX core to work in software, and the second thing is that the startup issue with the Incognito using the latest JED file, which is a requirement for this VBXE modification here, the presence of the VBXE made that issue worse. Now this was the issue where you'd get dumped straight into the configuration menu saying profile reset, because there was an issue with reading the NVRAM on the real-time clock chip. I overcame that bug by extending the power on delay in the Incognito firmware before it actually attempts to communicate with the RTC chip over the SPI bus. And that works determinately on all machines that get the new JED. That works fine. I don't know why it's necessary, but it works. Now with the VBXE present, I'm getting that issue again, even with the longer startup delay. So even if I could get the FX core to work, and Candle assures me that it does work on his machine, he's able to run VBXE demos using this board. Even if I could get that to work, I've still got the nightmare of having that startup issue back again. And I don't know how long I can extend boot stability delays to combat that. It's just a pain in the arse basically. So for two reasons, I don't think this, or certainly not on this particular board, is going to work. So what I might do in the future, in a follow-up, I'll transplant this into another motherboard that doesn't have the Supercolor CPU card in it. I'll have a different Incognito in it, and we'll try it again and see if we get any different results. And if I don't get different results with a different motherboard, I'm going to have to give up on this whole idea. And I think I've got a spare Sophia, and I think I'll put a Sophia in it, because I know that does work. I really wanted this to work. I wanted to see it working. I was quite excited to see a VBXE demo running on the 800, but it doesn't work yet. And my original attempt, which was never filmed of course, of wiring up a VBXE in this machine, the results were basically identical to what I'm getting here. So I'm sorry about that. I'm sorry it didn't meet with success yet, but hopefully the actual procedure has been of some interest to you. Thanks for watching. Thanks to all the patrons. I value your continued support, and note that I'm releasing videos a little bit early for patrons, usually 1 or 2 days early, So if you'd like to get early access to the videos as they come out, you might want to consider becoming a patron, because that's one of the, well, it's that's the perk. That and the fact that you, of course, featured in the acknowledged list of patrons in the video. So anyway, thank you very much for watching. Please like and share the video if you feel like it. That would be very much appreciated. And I've got a firmware update video to do, I think, probably the next one. So I'll get on with that as soon as I can. And in the meantime, thank you very much. And all being well, I will see you in the next video. So bye-bye for now.